I orchestrated a mass resignation of AV techs, leading to Beta AV's collapse and Alpha AV reclaiming million-dollar contracts. This narrative occurs between 2007 and 2014. I pursued education in television production. I gained experience by working in a television studio on various shows and documentaries, and was so proficient that I subsequently launched my own video production business. However, an important detail to understand about this field is that the initial investment can be exorbitant when you get started. It is impossible to perform the work unless you possess the necessary equipment, so at the very least, you must allocate $25,000 for equipment before you can officially open for business. Consequently, during the first few years, while my enterprise was still operating at a loss and repaying the equipment expenses, I resolved to take on a supplementary job that would provide a steady income. With my prior experience in television and expertise with multiple types of equipment, I secured a chance to work at a prestigious luxury hotel in my city. When I say upscale, I refer to the pinnacle of luxury hotels. It was one of the oldest hotels in the Midwest and the most luxurious independent hotel in the entire state. Imagine the Plaza Hotel of the Midwest. Let's refer to it as Fancy Hotel. In 2007, I began my journey as their brand new audiovisual technician. As an audiovisual technician, I was essentially responsible for ensuring all events at the hotel went smoothly. A few hours prior to any event, I would be the individual in the ballroom preparing everything. This included arranging the lights, sound systems, projectors, screens, and even stage components. I made the difference between an event appearing impressive and one occurring in a bare-bones environment. If the event required it, I would also be the person at the back of the room managing the technical table. This is where my previous television studio experience became invaluable. I was accustomed to the fast-paced nature of operating a live event, so I felt right at home. After each event, I would strike the room and ensure it was ready for the next occasion. I excelled in my position, remarkably well. In fact, within 6 months of my employment, I was promoted to lead technician. This meant it was my responsibility to ensure every event was correctly set up and timely. I supervised a team of 3 other technicians, ensuring that every event was in perfect condition. I can genuinely say that I never missed a deadline for an event, even when turnaround times in the ballroom were measured in minutes instead of hours. I learned from my time in the television industry that when an event has a start time, regardless of challenges, the show must go on. Thus, I always found a way to make it happen. A bit of context about the operations at Fancy Hotel: I had multiple layers of supervision. Directly above me were the director and the salesperson. The salesperson managed the months of planning, contracts, and billing with clients, while the director was the key figure connecting all hotel activities with those of the audiovisual department. Together, we were one section of a larger audiovisual company that we can name Alpha AV. Alpha AV is a national organization with branches in hundreds of hotels across the nation. My branch of Alpha AV was affiliated with Fancy Hotel. In addition to serving the event guests at the hotel itself was also regarded as a client. Alpha AV operated under a contract that granted us the ability to work at the hotel. Fancy Hotel directed all audiovisual business our way in exchange for a share of the profits, while also providing all hotel audiovisual services at a discounted rate. Hotel events could be as simple as a projector and screen for weekly staff meetings, or as complex as a significant corporate event for the parent company. The hotel is under the ownership of a significant corporation, which we will refer to as Billion-Dollar Corporation, or BDC for brevity. This corporation owns several high-end luxury hotels throughout the country. However, the headquarters for BDC was located just 3 blocks away from Fancy Hotel, making it the flagship hotel for the entire corporation. This was the hotel where BDC hosted all its events. It was always under scrutiny and held to the highest standards. Throughout my years working alongside BDC, I established some substantial connections. As an audiovisual technician with a video production enterprise, I was able to leverage this into a very lucrative situation where I began handling the corporation's video production needs when required for hotel events. Whenever they had a presentation that demanded more than a simple PowerPoint, I created the video. Consequently, I became quite well known among the staff at Fancy Hotel, as well as the personnel at BDC. Event planners, executives, politicians, and CEOs recognized my name because I was the individual who made their large events successful. They placed their trust in me. I was occasionally the only outsider present during highly confidential meetings. Moreover, I was vetted by the Secret Service, making me the sole audiovisual technician in the city with the security clearance to be in the same vicinity as the president. Those years with Alpha AV were among the most rewarding of my career, and I consistently received commendations and acknowledgement from clients, the hotel, and BDC. However, all good things must eventually end, and in 2012, Alpha AV's contract expired. BDC had the option to either renew the contract or engage with another audiovisual company. Enter Beta AV. Over the previous year and a half, they were expanding their operations in our area. It was no secret that some Beta AV executives had close ties with certain BDC executives, so it wasn't unexpected when the decision was made to cut costs, leading to Alpha AV being outbid and for Beta AV to replace us as the hotel's resident audiovisual company. Did I mention, this was a nationwide situation? For the previous 5 years, Alpha AV had been the audiovisual provider at every BDC hotel across the country, and now all locations were shifting to Beta AV. For our location, the flagship hotel, the contract stipulation required that I must be part of the deal. I had established relationships with the clients, and they were familiar with me. They trusted my work, which would facilitate the transition significantly. So there I was, transferred like an asset in a multimillion-dollar agreement. On one grueling 20-hour day in May 2012, I moved Alpha AV out of the hotel, clocked out for the last time, and immediately clocked in with my new position as the lead audiovisual technician for Beta AV, bringing in all their equipment. Considerably inferior and less expensive equipment. The changeover began quite poorly, to put it lightly. The clients relied on me, and the hotel had confidence in me, but I sensed that my new company still viewed me as a member of a rival organization, an unnecessary employee they were obligated to hire. The discrepancies became evident almost immediately. I had been managing the storage areas for 5 years and knew the most efficient way to organize the equipment, but they insisted on moving things according to their preferences. Over the next 2 months, they quickly learned that I was indeed correct, and the equipment found its way into the right places. The audiovisual office underwent significant changes as it became off-limits to technicians. It was designated exclusively for the director, the salesperson, and clients. There was no reason for us technicians to interact with the clients. In my 5 years with Alpha AV and my tenure at Beta AV, no client had ever entered the audiovisual office. We always approached them, never vice versa. Thus, this new policy simply stripped me of my desk and the only space for my technicians to wait between events. These were merely changes that impacted us technicians. Over the next year, the adjustments made by this new audiovisual company started to affect the clients. A pattern began to emerge that the clients picked up on. Longtime clients who had hosted the same events at the hotel for years suddenly observed a significant increase in costs for everything. And then, upon their arrival to see the ballroom, they noticed it was nowhere near as exquisite as in previous years. In summary, we were overcharging while providing inadequate service. I attempted to offer our clients some of the equipment I knew they required, but the new salesperson promptly halted those efforts whenever he caught me. If they hadn't paid for it, they simply weren't receiving it. A year of this situation unfolded, with clients receiving minimal services for what they had paid. My reputation endured for a while, but clients soon realized that my ability to provide the exceptional service they expected was restricted. Business began to decline, and events increasingly turned to external audiovisual providers. After a year of this steady downturn, a shakeup occurred in the hotel. The audiovisual director perceived this decline as a signal to retire, and the salesperson transitioned to another role. Upon their departure, a new director from a different hotel arrived, taking on both roles simultaneously. While the previous team may have performed poorly, This new individual made them appear competent by comparison. How do you remedy overcharging? By raising prices even further. How do you communicate with your clients? You condescend and ensure they understand that you possess superior knowledge. I found myself having to actively intervene to remove him from events whenever he began to openly dispute with event planners. While I lacked official authority over him, when his conduct crossed lines with clients, I was more than willing to treat him as a child and send him back to his office. Over the years, I had built my reputation in the city as the audiovisual technician that everyone preferred to work with, and this individual could undermine all my hard work with a single encounter. When this new director assumed control, it was clear what the future held. Beta AV was a sinking vessel, and the captain of the flagship hotel was recklessly pursuing disaster. I remained in touch with many of the executives at BDC, so I felt a sentimental obligation to stay with the hotel and attempt to salvage it from the downward slide. I needed to think of a way to retain the clients. However, this proved quite challenging given how the new director was damaging our reputation. Beta AV was corrupt from the top down, implementing policies that prioritized financial gain and authority over delivering what our clients required for their events. At our lowest point, staple events that had consistently taken place at our hotel for decades began shifting to other hotels. Do you realize how much scrutiny it generates in a billion-dollar corporation when your audiovisual company is accountable for costing the hotel millions of dollars in lost events? The decline escalated, and the breaking point arrived when it started affecting our hours. The four of us technicians were fortunate to receive 10 hours of work weekly. Clients at the hotel simply were not selecting us anymore, resulting in an insufficient number of hours for everyone. An audiovisual technician's work schedule is not typical. It is driven by event needs. If there are no events to work, there are no hours available. If hours are scarce, income is non-existent. Furthermore, as an audiovisual technician, you must be prepared to act whenever an event is scheduled, making it impossible to pursue a supplementary part-time position to fill the gaps. We had reached our limit. I began to orchestrate a small operation during our abundance of free time. Everyone started seeking new job opportunities, and when I say everyone, I refer not only to the 4 technicians at Fancy Hotel. A similar decline was occurring at all Beta AV locations nearby, so I persuaded every technician in the area to initiate their job searches if they weren't already doing so. Fortunately, our job hunts coincidentally yielded promising results around the same time, setting the stage for a coordinated event. Now, while nothing can definitively prove my involvement, a friend of mine at Alpha AV, my former director who had since been promoted to an executive role, may or may not have been given a heads up about the impending situation. A suggestion or two may have also found their way to a couple of contacts I maintained at BDC. BDC was becoming increasingly frustrated with Beta AV, yet they were bound by the same 5-year contract and had no option but to endure the decline until the agreement concluded, unless a significant event occurred to terminate that contract. Suddenly, in a coordinated fashion, every audiovisual technician in our region submitted their 2-week notices simultaneously. This took place just before a major event at Fancy Hotel for BDC. As noted previously, Fancy Hotel served as the flagship establishment where BDC hosted all their corporate events, and now the sole individual left to prepare and execute their largest event was the inept Beta AV director. This predicament created a substantial ripple effect throughout Beta AV. The most significant annual event for their biggest client at the flagship hotel was at risk, and they lacked the workforce to fulfill their commitments. They were in violation of the contract. Luckily, Alpha AV caught wind of the challenges unfolding and managed to intervene, providing the most impressive audiovisual setup BDC had ever experienced at their event. This sequence of events significantly impacted Beta AV's value as a company, and Alpha AV was eager to step in and make a proposal. Alpha AV ultimately absorbed Beta AV, including all equipment and personnel. Alpha AV also inherited the existing contract, which BDC readily allowed them to do. Alpha AV re-established itself at every BDC hotel nationwide, and events returned to the hotel once this news circulated, restoring our reputation. My strategy unfolded exactly as I had envisioned. The mass resignation I orchestrated proved to be the final blow that toppled a multimillion-dollar audiovisual company. Alpha AV successfully expanded back to their previous capacity and continues to be present at all of BDC's hotels today. BDC was incurring significant losses due to Beta AV, and they were quite relieved to see them go. Regrettably, this story does not conclude with a happy ending for me. As I mentioned, I held onto my position for much too long. I should have exited 2 years earlier than I did, and during those 2 years filled with minimal hours and meager pay, I found myself in a financial crisis that I only finished overcoming last year. My car was repossessed, my condo was foreclosed, and I was forced to shut down my business, selling all my equipment just to survive. From that moment forward, I could no longer pursue my ambitions and had to focus on following the financial returns instead, seeking positions that offered higher pay rather than roles that allowed me to engage in the work I truly love. Beta AV took everything from me, but I can take pride in asserting that I was the technician responsible for dismantling an entire company. Story 2. I reported my toxic ex-boss for software piracy, costing him a fortune. Years later, he sues me, but I make him pay even more in legal fees. This event occurred a few years ago, and it recently took on new consequences, so please be alerted it is a lengthy story. Part I how I caused my former boss to lose a substantial amount of money due to software piracy. To provide some background, I am an educator with a degree in advertising and have been engaged in information technology for the past 20-some years, although I discovered my passion for teaching about 10 years ago. Throughout this time, I worked at numerous educational institutions, from large institutions to smaller ones, gaining extensive experience both inside the classroom and behind the scenes, developing workbooks, video courses, learning platforms, and more. Consequently, I felt it was the right time to transition into a management role. An opportunity arose at a reputable digital art school, and I became the teaching manager, responsible for overseeing all educators and the interns' learning processes. It was a challenging yet fulfilling job. For a time, it quickly became clear that my employer was not the person he portrayed to students and staff. He exhibited frequent outbursts of anger and went out of his way to antagonize the team, setting unattainable expectations and inquiring about assignments he never delegated, yet somehow expected us to anticipate. During one meeting, he picked up a large chair and mimicked throwing it across the room as a joke. Nobody reacted, as no one doubted for a second that he might actually do it. Unsurprisingly, there was no laughter either. In my country, employers are allowed to keep employees on temporary contracts for up to 3 months, meaning you have no job security for 90 days and can be terminated at any time without repercussions for the company. My boss continually reminded everyone of this, half-jokingly, in an attempt to keep everyone alert. He exempted me from this treatment. He had a bad habit of treating managers differently, and offered consistent praise for my work until my temporary contract concluded, thereby making me a permanent employee with full benefits and protection against being terminated without legal obligations to pay me. Therefore, I was quite taken aback when he began the hostile treatment less than 24 hours after my temporary contract ended and my permanent employment commenced. Gone were the compliments, replaced instead by yelling, negative feedback, and increasingly absurd demands. We contracted an external company to maintain the classroom computers weekly, but suddenly malfunctions were all my fault. On one occasion, he made me stay after hours on a Saturday, once all students and staff had departed, and forbade me from leaving until every computer was operating correctly. He requested I find a new supplier, and I introduced him to a friend, clearly stating that I was not recommending him for hiring but merely facilitating an introduction, emphasizing that if my boss liked him after their conversation, it was his decision to make. A few weeks later, he berated me for socializing with this friend, insisting that managers should associate only with other managers and not with staff who were, in his view, beneath us. I found this absurd and reminded him that I had known this individual for years, suggesting that he could join us for drinks anytime if he wished. This was not the reaction he anticipated. the mistreatment escalated rather than diminished. One day, I began experiencing chest pains, and my left arm became completely numb. While my friend called for emergency assistance, I retreated to my boss's office, which at that time was occupied by his fiancée, and calmly informed her, "Please disregard me. I believe I am experiencing a heart attack, so I will just lie down here for a few minutes so the students do not see me." Naturally, she panicked. Fortunately, it was not a heart attack but an anxiety attack, and not the last I would experience. I was 36 at the time, and this was the first time I witnessed my mother cry since my father passed away more than 20 years earlier, due to, of course, a heart attack. I decided enough was enough and submitted my 30-day notice, citing health concerns, having not yet completed 6 months in the position. I met with my boss, did not assign blame to him, but stated that the stress was causing me to worry about leaving my family too soon, and assured him I would fulfill my entire notice period to complete every project we initiated since my hiring. I successfully updated the courses, finalized the development of the new e-learning platform, hired the educators for the upcoming semester, and even recorded promotional videos for each course offered by the school. With less than a week until my final day, he summoned me to his office to unveil the company's new career advancement plans. I am unsure of the exact terminology in English, but it refers to the planned progression each position has within the company. Therefore, this is what you can expect to earn in a few months. That is, if you stop being weak and simply do your job. I could not believe it. After enduring all the mistreatment and toxicity, I had attempted to take the higher road and conclude everything amicably, yet he referred to my health concerns as being weak. I was finished. I instructed him to deduct the remaining days from my final paycheck and departed. Now for the revenge. Remember when I introduced him to a friend who he subsequently hired? In my final days, I informed my boss that I would be starting my own school after my departure, but omitted the fact that the other employee was my business partner. Consequently, when my friend submitted his own 30-day notice, our boss became furious. He nearly threw my friend out, ordering him never to return and to leave immediately. According to the law, this meant he was required to pay my friend for that entire month, plus any days he had previously worked, in addition to commissions. Coupled with my final paycheck, which included 6 months of benefits, he had more than enough to launch our new venture. But that is not the extent of the revenge. He required us to sign a form of non-disclosure agreement containing numerous illegal clauses, which rendered the entire contract invalid, that restricted us from disclosing any company secrets during or after our employment, under the threat of a fine of $30,000, approximately $6,000 at that time. However, no contract in the world can prevent an individual, at least in my country, from reporting illegal activities. This is why I felt no concern when I reported him and his school for operating over 50 computers running pirated versions of Windows, Office, the entire Adobe suite, Revit, Cinema 4D, 3ds Max, and numerous other costly software applications. Not long before this, a major and established retail chain in our state had gone bankrupt due to retroactively paying fines for Windows piracy alone. So it was an understatement to say that the government took software piracy very seriously at that time. Things became even more amusing once you realize that the person reported receives an email detailing the complaint, aside from the name of the individual making the report, the moment it is filed, enabling them to prepare their defense. His response was entirely predictable. Approximately 5 minutes following our report, we received a similar email claiming we were in violation for using 30 unlicensed copies of Windows and many other programs. My business partner still maintained communication with the finance manager at our former job, and knowing that our ex-boss was likely adjacent to him, seething with rage, decided to send a photo of our sole classroom. With no computers in view, we chose to specialize in comic book creation classes, which did not require computers, and whenever we held a class that did, we asked our students to bring their own devices. Weeks later, I learned that the remaining staff had fled, leaving him with only an intern and a handful of part-time teachers. My previous boss kept a watchful eye on us, and upon discovering that some of his former teachers were seeking to collaborate with us for special classes, he resorted to blackmail, threatening to terminate their contracts if they persisted in engaging with us, despite there being no exclusivity clause in their agreements. Some of them called his bluff, resulting in him incurring another substantial financial loss for breaching their contracts. As time passed, I heard that he was scraping by, struggling to stay afloat. He previously filled classes every 6 months, booking every available date and time. Now, he can barely fill a single class, has begun offering only nighttime courses, and does not even operate every day, closing his doors for half the week due to a lack of students and insufficient funds to pay staff on those days. Before I departed, he had spent $40,000 on the architectural plans alone to expand the business within a year. But now, I hear he is contemplating shutting down entirely and only providing online courses, even prior to the pandemic. And now, for part 2 years after my revenge, I caused my former boss to again lose a considerable amount of money due to legal fees. First and foremost, I should mention that my own school has ceased operations. My friend and I were not compatible as business partners, and we are no longer even friends. That is simply how it goes. We liquidated our assets, sold what could be sold, and went our separate ways. I may eventually share details about my minor revenge against this individual. I admit that I hold several grudges, but this story is not focused on him. Several months later, I discovered that our former boss was suing us. Our school, which I previously mentioned, no longer existed. My former partner's sister, who also serves as his attorney, reached out to inform me of the situation. I was unable to locate any documentation in the public records, as the lawsuit was under court-ordered confidentiality. I consulted my attorney, and she advised, if they did not directly cite you, act as if you are unaware of the situation. Thus, I disregarded the whole matter for a few years. During the lockdown, the assigned official finally found me at home and served me. This also granted me access to my former boss's claims, as I had 15 days to prepare my defense. My wife discovered me laughing uncontrollably in front of the computer. His allegations were utterly absurd. He asserted that I had stolen his courses and used a printout from our, now defunct, website alongside his as proof, stating that it becomes evident that both schools offer the same courses. However, he offered no explanation for the similarities other than the names, which were not even identical. We had a segment of training under the heading, graphic design, but not a single class with that exact title, for instance, nor any class on his main subjects. Moreover, the majority of our courses focused on comic books, which he had never taught. He even labeled us cynical for daring to compete with him in the same market, despite the fact that my previous background in the education sector had led to my position at his company in the first place. At one point, the documents cited a statement from our site where we mentioned that we took past experiences as opportunities to learn from our mistakes and do things differently, which he referred to as a confession of plagiarism. I requested my attorney to allow me to write my own defense, leaving it to her to translate it into formal legal language. She ended up copy-pasting my entire statement, claiming that she could not have articulated it any better. I articulated the disgust I felt, detailed my teaching experience, and rebutted every single one of his claims with facts and tangible evidence, attaching printed conversations and saved emails while highlighting his own lack of proof. The judge dismissed the case and ordered him to cover all legal fees, including my attorney's fees. He could have avoided this by filing in small claims court, but since he sought $30,000 from the non-disclosure agreement as well as damages and penalties, he brought this upon himself. Just another nail in his coffin. In summary, my former boss hurled homophobic slurs at me for prioritizing my health over stress at work. Consequently, I reported him for software piracy, leading to significant financial loss. Years later, he sued me, resulting in even greater losses in legal expenses. I realized there may be several details I initially overlooked that could help clarify the circumstances better. As many of you speculated, English is not my first language. My primary language is Portuguese. Even as a writer, I must confess this is not my best work. Later yesterday, I posted about my former business partner on Petty Revenge, and I believe I was much more effective at conveying a cohesive narrative. However, be warned it is double the length for a very minor act of revenge at the end. Regarding the homophobic slur, the closest term in English to what was actually said would be faggot. But I deeply dislike that word and thought sissy would be more fitting. Additionally, it may be important to mention that I am queer. I am assigned male at birth, non-binary, and pan-bisexual. This individual was aware of at least the latter part. The former was something I did not fully comprehend until much later. Early in my training, my boss began to rant about how he would never hire women or homosexuals again because they were nothing but trouble. Suddenly, he paused and turned to me. "You're not a homosexual, are you?" "Actually, I'm bisexual." "All right then. So, not a homosexual." Phew. I assure you, I am not fabricating this. About the non-disclosure agreement, I referred to it as sorta an NDA. In truth, it was a coercive document he insisted I draft, outlining numerous rules and penalties regarding employee behavior, and required everyone to sign it. It was not prepared by an attorney. Once again, I drafted IT based on internet research and notes he had been sending me via email. As mentioned earlier, it contained numerous illegal clauses that made it effectively null and void, but his goal was to intimidate employees into believing it was legitimate and that defying him would lead to dire consequences. Additionally, he never provided anyone with a copy, which is also highly illegal. Concerning my attorney, she is actually my mother-in-law and not particularly proficient at her job. However, as family, she does not charge me. Thus, this lawsuit represented a significant victory for her as well. I also consider myself to be a well-educated individual, and although my degree is in advertising, it has never hindered my desire to learn about various subjects. For instance, I taught myself English, though not exceptionally well, haha. I possess considerable knowledge about law and local regulations, which has aided me in the past, including all the times I attempted to start a new business. Thus, it is not entirely surprising that I was able to draft my own legal defense. Thank you to everyone for the comments. Story 3. After 2 years, I ended my friendship with Haley. She kept dragging Mary into our issues and hurt me while trying to one-up others. I, a 16-year-old female, ended a 2-year friendship earlier this academic year. To provide some background, I will explain my experiences from my first year of high school up to the present. In my first period class, I met a girl, whom I will refer to as Haley. Haley and I shared that class with 3 other friends, whom I will call Kayla, Layla, and Anna. Together, we formed a group alongside a mutual friend, whom I will name Mary, through Haley. We all became very close, and I typically sat with Haley and Mary every day. Everything seemed great until we entered 10th grade, when we began to gradually drift apart. Mary and I remained close to Haley. I had a science class along with Haley, which was a challenge for me, as I struggled with the subject and didn't appreciate the teacher's dismissive attitude towards my questions. We argued frequently during 10th grade. It seemed like every few weeks, there would be a dispute between Haley and me. Whenever this happened, I would inform Mary to keep her in the loop. Then, during a lunch period, we began discussing trust. I admit that I made a thoughtless comment by saying I felt closer to Mary than to Haley due to our ongoing conflicts. This upset Haley, and I tried to clarify that I was merely expressing my frustration with the constant fighting. The bell rang, and we went to our classes, but Haley chose not to join me as usual and instead went in another direction. Mary and I dismissed this as her simply heading to class, but when I later attempted to contact her, I discovered that she had blocked my number. I felt bad and somewhat guilty, yet I didn't want to apologize for speaking my truth. Around this time, I had also begun seeing a therapist to help me manage my stress. We had previously agreed that after our last argument, we would both make an effort to communicate better when we were upset with each other. It felt to me as though she had broken my trust. I wanted to share my accomplishments with her, particularly showing off my ribbons, but she wouldn't engage with me. Weeks passed, and we eventually spoke, but I accidentally lost my temper with her. Some messages exchanged over text were also said, which I won't share here for privacy reasons. I felt frustrated that she wouldn't communicate her feelings to me so we could resolve our issues. By the end of 10th grade, we had a limited conversation, but during the summer, she hardly reached out, and I did the same. On the first day of 11th grade, I received a text from her inquiring why I had blocked her on social media and whether we could resume our friendship. While out for a walk with my dog, I felt anxious and shaky. I told her I had blocked her because we had not communicated over the summer, and I assumed we were no longer friends. Ultimately, I said no to rekindling our friendship, expressing that while our first year was memorable and I didn't regret it, the conflicts during 10th grade left me feeling negative about our relationship. She requested that we reassess the situation and speak in person, wishing to hear my perspective. I agreed but later texted to retract my invitation, apologizing for backing out, and explained that I was focusing on my mental health and had been discussing this with my therapist. She responded that it was fine and wanted to explain her reasons for not contacting me over the summer. Haley indicated that her choice was based on a desire to give us time to settle our emotions and focus on rebuilding our friendship during the new school year. She mentioned that she was in therapy with her father due to issues they were facing and wasn't able to see her therapist. We found ourselves in some awkward situations, as there were times when I aimed to talk to Mary, and Haley attempted to do the same, leaving both of us unaware of each other's intentions. I don't harbor animosity toward Haley. However, she started texting me out of the blue, asking to discuss how we should move forward as we shared a class this semester. We spoke, and both of us offered apologies. I expressed regret for upsetting her, as that was never my intention, and I was sorry for any outbursts I might have had, admitting she felt as though I was using her as an emotional punching bag. She apologized for her lack of communication, acknowledging that our text exchanges felt impersonal. While she accepted that we weren't friends, she mentioned she would eventually come to terms with my decision not to pursue a friendship. I felt hopeful following our conversation, believing that everything would be fine, allowing me to refocus on school, horses, and my friends. However, what upset me was that, according to Mary, Haley had been complaining about me to her frequently, which was unfair since Mary and I are very close friends. Mary attempted to address this with Haley, but it yielded no results. Haley and I had mutually agreed, for Mary's sake, to maintain a respectful distance and avoid bad-mouthing each other, which unfortunately had become the case. Mary's birthday was earlier this month, and we had an inside joke involving playful arguments with Layla about our hair colors. I purchased matching sweaters for us in blonde and brunette shades and created her a thoughtful card. I discovered afterward that Haley had been voicing dissatisfaction about me. During an escape room outing with Haley, Mary, and 2 other friends, Haley and I collaborated on certain challenges, and it went well, leaving me feeling proud of our teamwork. Ice skating followed, which was enjoyable despite my lack of skating skills. Once Mary's birthday gathering concluded, Haley became overly attached to Mary, detracting from the experience for the rest of us as it was evident from our body language that we felt like third wheels. I jokingly called her my wife, based on our joke, which the others didn't understand. Present exchanges went smoothly. Later, during a sleepover with Kayla, I mentioned feeling uncomfortable about Haley's clinginess. A couple of days later, as I walked with Mary, she admitted needing a break from Haley due to her ongoing complaints about me. Out of curiosity, I inquired about what Haley was saying because I thought we were in a good place after our conversation. Mary informed me that Haley believed I was being too attached to her. I reacted with disbelief, as I felt it was unreasonable for Haley to view my desire to have lunch or take walks with Mary, and Kayla, alone occasionally, as clingy. I asserted that the opposite was true. I barely had time with Mary while it was Haley who was being overly clingy. Kayla later remarked that if I was considered clingy, what did that make Haley? A leech? While rather blunt, it did convey a point. Mary agreed with us, expressing that she wasn't seeing me enough and believed we should have more one-on-one time. Eventually, overwhelmed by Haley, Mary requested to have lunch together. I consented, and, since Haley was in our usual eating area, told her I would meet Mary in the lunch line for a private chat. Mary then relayed that Haley deemed my birthday gift inappropriate, claiming it was inconsiderate towards the rest of the group, and suggested I was taking our inside joke too far. I was taken aback. Mary mentioned she felt obliged to agree with Haley to maintain peace, but did not find my gift inappropriate. I shared this with Kayla, who insisted that Haley had no right to make such comments. I concurred, as these were inside jokes between Mary and me, while Haley and Mary likely have their own inside jokes, to which I feel indifferent since those relate to their relationship, not mine. Mary echoed my sentiments, expressing her frustration over the entire situation, and I wanted the drama to end. It's worth noting that even though Haley tends to avoid me when we are together, she is perfectly friendly in our drama class. Her behavior towards me has been inconsistent. To clarify, I don't care about her speaking negatively about me. I have wonderful friends who support me. My main issue lies in the fact that she consistently refuses to talk to me directly, as Mary has suggested, and continues to break the trust we mutually established, thus making Mary an unwanted mediator in this. That's what saddens me. The negative comments are the least of my concerns. Last Friday, I found myself at lunch sharing the same room with Haley after a particularly tough third period when I was feeling emotionally drained. She did not leave and interrupted conversations. She wasn't part of while my friends, who share similar challenges, and I were present. She seemed to engage in a competitive banter, attempting to outdo others. Furthermore, Haley hurt me during lunch when a subject arose related to surgeries, which is a sensitive topic for me. She made direct eye contact before commenting, "At least I don't have to undergo surgeries," while raising her eyebrow in a suggestive way, indicating the comment was aimed at me. The conversation then shifted, with Kayla mentioning her busy weekend schedule filled with studying, homework, and a cheer competition. Haley, wanting to compete for attention, began listing her own plans. As we walked to the bathroom, Kayla expressed her irritation over Haley's behavior, noting the one-upmanship she displayed. I would appreciate any advice on how to navigate this situation.